All right, hello everyone. I'll be presenting alongside Tatyana on representations of child sexual abuse in Jamaica, a corpus-assisted discourse of popular news media. The team of researchers who were involved in this project were, of course, Adele Jones, who is the project leader for Ni3 Research Center, or the previous project leader, I should say. Tatyana, who led this particular corpus assisted discourse project. Myself, Christine, Roxanne, and Carol, who are all from the Jamaican team, and Nadia, who is the current project leader for Non-in-3, and Zymin, who assisted Tatyana with her aspects of the research. So to start, we want to look at child sexual abuse and reported cases in Jamaica. What is the context? Now, child sexual abuse globally is a public health concern. And in Jamaica, the numbers and statistics are staggering. Data from the Office of the Children's Registry shows exponential increases in reports of child sexual abuse between 2007 and 2015. Now, as you could see from the graph, in 2016 and 2017, the numbers slightly decreased, but the numbers are still concerning. Based on these statistics, we can safely say that CSA is endemic in Jamaica. But these are only reported cases. It is felt that the available statistics gathered by various national agencies do not necessarily represent the true extent of the problem. So, nonetheless, despite the large numbers of reported cases, the response at all levels of society has not necessarily matched the severity of the problem. CSA is life-changing for survivors, and international research points to a range of long-term consequences associated with CSA. Recently, we conducted a large island-wide survey across Jamaica, across several schools in Jamaica between 2018 and 2019. The survey consisted of around 7,182 children between ages 9 and 17 years. We explored various forms of child maltreatment, both inside and outside the home. And what we found was 15% of children reported experiencing CSA perpetrated by an adult living inside their home, and 35% indicated that they experienced CSA by an adult living outside of the home. So prevalence numbers also are significant and match the reports that we're seeing with the various agencies, including the OCR, the Office of the Children's Registry, and police reports. Considering the prevalence and increasing number of reported cases of CSA in Jamaica, it was important for us to look at how child sexual abuse are represented, or child sexual abuse is represented to the public, and how children and their experiences are framed by the media. So with increasing reports of child sexual abuse, we also found increasing reports of that in the media, where the media highlights incidents of child sexual abuse across various types of abuse and across various types of abuse. The newspapers are one of our main forms of media that give access to reports of abuse of children. And the media has a role to play, we believe, in the social construction of child abuse as a major problem in society. On one hand, their framing of child abuse has implications for negative judgment and can further marginalize children and increase stereotypes and victim blaming. But on the other hand, the media can also heighten awareness and build positive changes around child sexual abuse in a society. So we wanted to examine media representation of children and their experiences of abuse, specifically child sexual abuse. And so I'll hand over to Nadia, who will highlight what our research questions were, the methodology that was followed in conducting the study, and some of the major findings for the study. Tatyana?
Okay, thank you, Kenisha. So I'll go straight for the research questions. We were interested in, first of all, in the way how children in general are portrayed in Jamaican press, but also we're interested specifically in discourses surrounding child abuse in Jamaican papers and the implications of these presentations. Our methodology was a combination of qualitative and quantitative analysis. And qualitative analysis was based on discourse studies of the linguistic material in conjunction with the social context that surrounds the child abuse in Jamaica. Our quantitative research was conducted through the analysis of Jamaican papers, the articles from the Jamaican papers, using corpus approach, which uses computational tools to uncover linguistic patterns across very large amounts of text. So how large was our corpus? Our corpus contained all the articles available from 4 major news outlets and contains about 8 million words, covering the period between 2018 and 2020. So what is corpus analysis looking at? It's looking at collocations, which collocations are strong and stable word combinations and associations in particular types of texts. So here, for example, we can see that the violence against children is a strong sort of word combination, because it is apparently a very strong pattern here. We also look at frequencies, how frequent this combination is, and concordance lines if we want the context of this occurrence. If we want a larger context, then the corpus tools that I've been using show us several paragraphs that we can analyze. So first, as I said, we looked at the representation of child and other words related with child, girl, boy, youth, and pickney in the newspapers. The rationale for that was that the debates about sexual abuse of children are embedded in the discourses about childhood in general and representation of child in general. So in order to follow the how children and child are represented, the subcorpus was built, and subcorpus was built only with articles containing these words, and that gave us a more manageable corpus of 510,000 words. So word sketch is the corpus tool that allows us to see these stable word combinations. For example, if we look at the nouns that are modified by child, you can see that abuse and child are very frequent. First of all, it's one of the top frequent combinations, but also the typicality score, the statistical score that indicates the associative strength of the words is very strong as well. So that means that this is a proof of the fact that the words don't occur together in corpus accidentally. And also, interestingly, all the sort of 12 words here, they are all the top frequent and typical words modified by child. They are all related either to abuse or to danger to children. We can also use it, look at other sort of sections, for example, modifiers of child, and this is sort of adjectives, adjectival modifiers. And I will look at them in a minute, but so far I just want to show you visualization of 10 most significant collocations of child in the corpus, and you can see that abuse is the closest to the child, so showing the strength of this association in the corpus, and also the bubble is big that shows the frequency. Now, looking at modifiers or adjectives, adjectival modifiers associated with these words. I looked at 1,600 of these modifiers and put them into sort of several groups. The most interesting sort of conclusion from the looking at modifiers is that the profile of the word child, the collocational profile, is that the adjectives are mostly descriptive. They are descriptive in the sense that they are very factual. They rely on age or quantity of children, family status, nationality or ethnicity, and that is in over 85% of all the cases. And here's an example, for example, of age and example of the numerical sort of pre-modifiers of children. Whereas emotive, evaluative, and personality adjectives are only under 15%. And why does that matter? But that is because the psycho-lexical research tells us that personality descriptive adjectives are the primary way of sort of attributing different personality dimensions to people in speech, and that is shows us that in this particular case, papers are not particularly interested in personality qualities of children. You can see that this orange sector is the only 15 or less than 15% of personality and evaluative adjectives. All the rest, the purple ones, the purple sectors are sort of descriptive, perfunctory, really factual description of children. So from the point of view of discourse analysis, that signals the quantification of children first. Children are seen as numbers and quantities. Functionalization, again, that means that children are sort of seen and classified and defined by status in the family, firstborn, second child, or by their social position. Also, they are generalized and collectivized. That means that they're seen as group, non-discriminant, non-descriptive group. It appears in the collocations many children, our children, all children, and children is twice as common as child. That again testifies to this generalized sort of view of children. Having looked at that, we looked also at child abuse discourses, and first thing that came out of this research was that the generic representation prevailed rather than specific or episodic representation. Episodic representation refers to a representation of a particular case of child abuse. And this is interestingly actually echoes what the Guide for Caribbean Practitioners said. They sort of encourage the papers to highlight the human stories behind the statistics. And so far as this research showed, it's not quite happening yet. Another point of interest was who is in the focus of every utterance containing the words sexual abuse or abuse. And we can see that with the prevalence of generic representation, it is institutional institutions that are in the center and the representatives of this institution, business people, sport personalities, and so on. With only 29% of sort of episodic representation, the victims are represented only, or in the focus of utterance, only in 8% of the cases. So representation of child abuse in the newspapers are overwhelmingly generic, focusing on institutions. And here's an example. That's what I mean by focusing on institutions. Here in the center of the sentence, talking about protecting children from abuse, is Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association and their president. If we look at the victim in the center, you can see that this sentence places the victim in the center, but it is a generalized representation, like too many children are experiencing. So the representation is vague, is very generic, and quite often it is used by various representatives of various organizations with rhetorical aims. Another point that we wanted to make is the voice, whose voice is represented in these cases that are highlighted in the papers. And again, it is institutional and personalities. Institutions and personalities prevail. They have the highest percentage of voice given to them, whereas in total, victims and survivors have only 3% of all the representations, and direct speech is only seen in 5 cases or in 2% of all. And again, I'll give you a couple of examples. Here's examples of institutional voices here. Chief Executive of Child Protection Family Agency is reminding, and then Montego Bay businesswoman Karina Mabani said, and then again, presidents of Jamaica Cycling Federation said. So they are voicing some concern or some things about the children, whereas victims or survivors' voice is heard in much rarer occasions. Here are these 2 rare occasions when victims speak with the first person and with a direct speech, I. But we have to remember that out of 254 cases of these representations, only 5 instances, or 2%, where victims were given the actual voice and direct words to speak for themselves. This is not only the case in Jamaica. It is overwhelmingly journalistic representations of child sexual abuse exclude victims, and this is speaking about the research in Australia. This is research in the UK. Child survivors remain faceless and inaudible. So this is a sort of universal, a global problem with representation of child sexual abuse. Another point that we wanted to make is that there are certain representations that are normalized crime using euphemisms and the wording that presumes of consent in, for example, have sex with, like in this example, have sex with a 12-year-old girl, with underage person. And even though the definition of CSA in the World Health Organization clearly said that, and in other sources, I'm sure, clearly said that a child cannot consent, the underage child cannot consent to any form of sexual activity, papers still continue using these expressions. Another point is sensationalism, and I wouldn't go into the details because I don't have time, but I have sort of a lot of numbers about that. Sensationalism in reporting, it sort of manifests itself in disproportionate attention to case involving celebrities, both as victims and as perpetrators, and it is disproportionate. And also representation of voice of celebrities. Celebrities are speaking on behalf or about, so they're given voice twice as in twice as many cases as children, victims and survivors. Also disproportionately extensive coverage of the most extreme and shocking cases. That was also the case in our corpus. And the last point I wanted to make is the discourses of victimhood and surviving. So victim was used in 51 cases when children were referred as as victims of violence and crime, and survivor only once. And I understand that the reason that because victim is sort of a court term, it's a legal term. However, papers don't even consider to sort of change the emphasis from victimization to the experience of survival, which is much more sort of life-affirming experience. Now, close to the victimhood are discourses of innocence and vulnerability. And again, going back to the absolutely wonderful guide for Caribbean practitioners, it said that the media often depicts children as silent victims or charming innocents. And this is the case in our corpus, because vulnerable and innocent are ranking quite high as collocates of child in our corpus. And there are also adjectives with the same meaning, which are also quite numerous. So that means that Jamaican papers reproduce the cliches of innocence, weakness, vulnerability, representing quite a sort of one-dimensional view of victims as weak and passive, and in the same way marginalizing those who do not conform to this image. Right, and now conclusions, and I pass the floor on to Kenisha, please.
Thank you again, Tatyana, for that. So, in concluding, I think what needs to be said here is this is a rare view into the Jamaican media and specifically the newspaper's portrayal of children and child sexual abuse. Whilst there are guidelines, for example, through the Guide for Caribbean Media Practitioners, the findings shows that there are significant deviations from recommended practices. The findings of this study show that newspapers need to find that delicate balance between giving children the opportunity to represent themselves and tell their own stories as part of public discourse, while ensuring that they are not exploited through sensationalism and lack of adherence to proper ethical practices. Particularly, consideration should be given to infusing specific training in reporting on children and child maltreatment at different levels of media and journalistic training programs. Continuous training through workshops, seminars, and professional groups for journalists and media practitioners may help to reinforce the need for caution and sensitivity in media reports on or regarding children and child sexual abuse. It is, in fact, important because the media is an important agent in helping to prevent and intervene in child sexual abuse and to help the public to understand that child sexual abuse will not be tolerated in the society. Thank you, everyone, for listening.